So, thank you again for joining us this evening. We're going to be starting off in the book of John, chapter 2. And I love this story. There's only 10 verses in it, and not even every verse is a complete sentence. There's actually only 9 sentences within these 10 verses. And so starting in verse 1, it says, "On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Now both Jesus and his disciples were invited to the wedding. And when they ran out of wine, the mother of Jesus said to him, 'They have no wine.'" How many of us know this story, right? Yeah, you know it. Most of us know the story. And so we understand that this running out of wine is kind of a big deal, right? But there's more to it than that. You see, it wasn't just a big deal because it was going to be the catalyst for Jesus' first miracle. It wasn't just a big deal because they were running out of snacks. And I totally understand, that snack to time ratio is pivotal when you're planning an event. But there's still more to it than that. You see, in that Jewish culture, being a good host was such a central part to being a Jew that there were actually laws pertaining to hospitality. And so this family running out of wine, it wouldn't have just been seen as embarrassing. It wouldn't have even just been seen as a bad omen for this marriage moving forward. The guests could have actually sued the hosts, taken them to court for a lack of hospitality. And so they run out of wine on the third day. These celebrations lasted for 8 days. They didn't even make it to the halfway point. This is not good. And now, as I'm reading through this, and I'm picking up the little details, and I'm trying to immerse myself in this, I started to think something. Now, this isn't in Scripture. This is not a chapter and verse. This is just me being in the story. So stay with me. But from what I can read, there's a very big chance that Jesus may have been the reason they ran out of wine so quickly. One of the things you have to understand is that at this moment in time, Jesus is just beginning his ministry. Not too long before this, he just got baptized. And in fact, just immediately prior to this wedding, he met Nathanael and Philip and called them. And so you can imagine that when that invite originally first went out, it may have been more like, "Hey, Mary, we're so excited to have you. And yes, Jesus can come as well. Yeah, I know there's that guy that always follows him around, his disciple. Yeah, his disciples can come too." But then by the time the wedding actually is happening, Jesus now has like 5 disciples, 2 of which are nicknamed the Sons of Thunder. How much do you think those boys could throw back? I mean, they might have been doing cake stands on the wine jars. I don't know. But this we do know. This is true. That Jesus shows up and suddenly the wine jars are empty. And so often, in the moments where I feel alone, in the moments where I'm breaking down, I'm on the verge of just losing it, in the moments that I feel empty, are the moments where God is moving. It's where Jesus is already there, ready to do something I couldn't even possibly imagine. There may be times when we start to feel alone. But often in those times where we feel alone is where God is right there with us. Already. And you look at what we talked about last week, the woman at the well, the woman caught in the act of adultery, Peter sinking on the water. These were all moments that they felt alone. But these were also the moments where salvation was found. You look, the woman at the well, it was just the woman at the well and Jesus when he rescued her from her identity. It was just the woman caught in the act in Jesus when he saved her from judgment, death, and destruction. It was just Peter and Jesus on the water when he snatched him out of those depths. And so often, I think that when we're experiencing these moments of loneliness, these moments of emptiness, is when we're right on the precipice of heading down the path and the plans that God actually has for us. Isaiah 43 says what? Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by your name, and you are mine. And when you pass through the waters, they will not overtake you, and through the rivers, they shall not overflow you. And when you walk through the fire, it will not burn you, nor shall the flame scorch you, for I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. See, it's in those moments where we feel alone that God doesn't just appear. It's that he's already there, getting ready to do something. See, Jesus was already at the well. Jesus was already in the temple, and Jesus was already standing on the water. And I don't know, maybe you're having one of those moments right now. Maybe you're not. I don't know. I can't promise you a whole lot in this life. I just can't. I'm never going to be the one that tells you that everything's going to be lollipops and rainbows and smell like roses if you follow Jesus. I cannot promise that. But there is one thing that I can promise you. That at some point in this life, there will be moments where you feel absolutely and totally alone. That I can promise you. But again, these are the moments where God's not just waiting to appear, he's already right there for you. Turn with me to 1 Kings chapter 17. And here we're introduced to Elijah. And he comes on the scene and he proclaims a drought over the entire land. It's a drought that would end up lasting 3 years and 6 months. And it was so severe, we're talking no rain, no dew, no moisture. The brooks were drying up. I mean, there was absolutely nothing, nada, zilch, zero, zippo. And so then picking up in verse 8, it says, Then the word of the Lord came to him, saying, Arise, go to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and dwell there. See, I have commanded a widow there to provide for you. So he arose and went to Zarephath. And when he came to the gate of the city, indeed a widow was there, gathering sticks. And he called to her and said, Please bring me a little water in a cup, that I may drink. And as she was going to get it, he called to her and said, Please bring me a morsel of bread in your hand. So here's Elijah. And he has the audacity in this drought to ask a stranger for a cup of water. And then as this poor widow is leaving to go do this, he calls back out to her and he says, Oh no, hey, by the way, bring me a piece of bread while you're at it. And so she turns around and she says to him, As the Lord your God lives, I do not have bread, only a handful of flour in a bin and a little oil in a jar. And see, I am gathering a couple sticks that I may go in and prepare it for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die. She pretty much tells Elijah, she says, Listen, not only do I not have anything to offer you, I don't even have anything for me or my son. And the little bit that I do have, yeah, I'm making it. We're going to eat it and then we're going to die because there's nothing left. And I love Elijah's response. Check this out. And Elijah said to her, Do not fear. Go and do as you have said, but make me a small cake from it first and bring it to me. And afterward, make some for yourself and your son. Oh my word, this guy. Did you see what just happened there? He went from asking for a piece of bread to, hey, bake me a cake. Right? He's like, yeah, that's fine. You want to make a last meal and die? Have at it. But first, make me something. And then you can make yourself something with whatever left over. But then if you go on and you read verse 14, he promises her that if she uses that little bit of oil and that little bit of flour She will never, ever run out of it. God will sustain it until he sends rain. And then you go on and you read verses 15 through 16. And this is exactly what happens. The promise comes to pass. But I want us to hang in this moment for just a little bit, because I want to draw your attention to two things. First, at the whole start of this, the beginning of chapter 17, just like in the beginning of John chapter 2, Elijah appears on the scene. Elijah is a type, a foreshadowing, what we would call a typology of Christ. And just like Jesus appearing on the scene in John chapter 2, what happens? Suddenly there's no more water. In fact, Elijah is the reason that it happens. He's the one that proclaims the drought. So then he goes to this widow woman, right? And what does he say to her? If you'll use what little you have, you will never run out of that which will give you life. Why did he say that? Well, you go back, it's because God had already told Elijah that he had provided for the situation. Go back, you can read it in verse 9. It's right there. And so how did this all work? How did the promise come to pass? The widow woman does as God commands. She pours it out, and yet it never runs dry. Notice it didn't happen where she poured it all out. The jars are absolutely empty. Elijah's got to come over, wave his magical hands, and then they all fill up. No, the moment she poured it out, it was already filled. Before she even baked the cake, before she poured it out, God had already destined the provision. He had already spoke it into existence. The miracle wasn't waiting on her generosity. It was waiting on her emptiness. But had she had held on to that little bit of flour, she would have been full of something that could not give her life. She would have never got to see the provision that God already had in place for her. But because of her willingness to empty herself, she discovered that she was actually full. See, the world will tell you that you have to stay full, that you have to have all the answers. And religion will tell you the same thing. It'll say you have to have all your steps in order. You got to stay on top. You got to have all the knowledge. But Jesus says, no, just come. Just come empty. Heading back to John chapter 2. Starting in verse 5. It's speaking of Mary, the mother of Jesus. It says, his mother said to the servants, whatever he says to you, do it. I want to hit a quick pause right there, because that's something so special for you and I. Do you realize this is the last time Mary ever speaks in Scripture? These are the last words that we ever see from her. And what does she give us? No doctrine, no theology, no formula, no 5 steps to make your miracle happen. Just whatever he says, do it. That's it. That's her legacy. The woman that gave birth to Jesus, raised him, saw him grow up knowing who he was, and the last thing she tells us is what? Can you trust him enough to do whatever he says, even when it doesn't make sense? And what Jesus is about to ask the servants to do definitely doesn't make sense. Picking up in verse 6, it says, now there were set there 6 water pots of stone, according to the manner of purification of the Jews, containing 20 or 30 gallons apiece. And Jesus said to them, fill the water pots with water, and they filled them up to the brim. And I love what John is doing there for you and I, because it's absolutely pivotal, his description. Notice he doesn't just say that there were some pots. He doesn't even mildly describe them by saying there were some stone pots. He says and tells us that these pots were used in a ritualistic fashion. You see, these pots would have sat at or near the entrance to the house. And every single person, every guest that entered into this house would have washed their hands in the water in these jars. It usually took an estimated between 30 to 60 seconds. And these were hands that had been out on the unpaved roads, these nasty, dirty, filthy roads. The same hands that maybe wiped away sweat, that handled ungroomed donkeys and horses and camels and other livestock. Hands that picked boogers and scraped off scabs and wiped dirty baby butts and Lord knows who else's butt. These were not the jars that you'd want to take a long drink from, much less serve the party wine. Right? So what does that tell us about Jesus? That he looked at these bacteria-ridden, these filthy, nasty jars and said, I can use those. He didn't wait for someone to go off and get something more worthy. He didn't ask the servants to try to clean them up, to purify them, to sanitize them. No. He looked at what everyone else would have rejected, what everyone else found filthy, what everyone else didn't even turn an eye to, and he said, that. I can use that. I want that. And it's the same thing he does with you and I. Continuing on, verse 8. And he said to them, draw some out now and take it to the master of the feast. And they took it. When the master of the feast had tasted the water that was made wine and did not know where it came from, but the servants who had drawn the water knew. I love that part. Pretty much says, yeah, the MC didn't know where it came from, but the servants knew. Oh. Could you imagine the look on their faces? I'd love to have been a fly on that wall as they try to just hold it together as they're serving him this cup. They're like, yep, nothing to see here. This is totally ordinary wine. This is not from those nasty jars. Right? Keep going. It says, the master of the feast called the bridegroom, and he said to him, every man at the beginning sets out the good wine. And when the guests have well drunk, then the inferior. You have kept the good wine until now. See, Jesus didn't just have a miracle. He took the dirty, the forgotten, the abandoned, the imperfect, the nasty, what everyone else rejected, and he not only filled it with wine, but he filled it to the brim, overflowing with the best wine ever. But this is where I have to ask, what would have happened if they just decided to ignore the emptiness? What if they just tried to play it off? What if they had just been like, you know what, grab some cups, get some water, squeeze a grape into it, maybe no one will tell the difference. Or you know what, let's all just go around, have the servants drink some water, act like it's great wine, maybe everyone will be drunk enough and they'll all just play along. See, the world, and even more so, religious Christianity will tell you to fake it until you make it. They would have told the woman at the well, you get your own living water. The woman caught in the act of adultery, you be your own defender. Hey, Peter, how long can you tread water, bro? Told the wedding party, man, go stomp your own grapes. But what does Jesus say? Come. Just come empty. Isaiah 55 says, ho, all you who thirst, come and drink the water. Yes, come and buy milk and wine without money and without cost. See, Jesus says what? Come hungry, come broken, come tired, come empty, and watch what I will do. Maybe some of you have found yourself in the shoes of the wedding party. You had all these great plans. I mean, you had plans and backup plans and checklists, and you're going down that checklist going, yep, I've got this. And then one day everything seems to fall apart. Maybe it was like a dam just bursting in the middle of the night and you awoke to your life absolutely flooded and destroyed and seemingly underwater. Or maybe it didn't happen overnight. Maybe you started to notice cracks. Maybe all the things that you were taught that your life should look like, what your life should center around, All the things that you thought were so central started to crumble under the weight of what you've witnessed, what you've experienced, what you've seen, the pressure of it. Now it's starting to fall apart. Maybe you're like the widow woman. You've always had to carry this burden of responsibility. Maybe even from a young age, you were the one that had to have all the answers. You were the one that always had to be the provider. But now, you've been in survival mode so long, and it's starting to run out. I've been there. I've had the 1-year plan. I had the 5-year plan. I even had a 20-year plan. And I'll be clear, these weren't plans that were selfish or ungodly. These were plans that I thought God was leading me towards. And then suddenly, in the blink of an eye, everything just shattered and fell out from underneath me. And I watched it crumble, and I felt like I was falling into a pit. And every time I tried to climb out of this pit, I would just slide back down in the mud even further. You been there? But it doesn't stop at the brokenness. That's not the only thing that hurts. Then there's the being alone in the silence. And all the thoughts that rage in your head. What did I do wrong? Did I not have enough faith? Did I mishear God? Maybe God wasn't in this. Maybe this was just my own selfish actions. What happened? Where did I screw up? Was I in sin? And that loneliness, that silence is an emptiness of itself. And it hurts so much because the one you thought was right there with you seems so far away. You question even if he's even there anymore. And then it doesn't end there. Then you got to leave the house. You got to go in public. And they mean well, but the questions. Hi, how are you? What are you doing? Oh, I thought you were doing it. Oh my God, just make it stop. Please, for the love of God, make it stop. Because they want answers when you can't even answer their own voice in your head. It's overwhelming. And it's starting to pile up all around you, towering over you. And the weight, the burden of the expectations of your family, your friends, the world, they start to tower around you like you're in the middle of a valley. But even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. See, there's not a valley he isn't already in. He knows the depth of your despair. He knows the depth of your hurt and your emptiness. And I will say this until the day that I die. Eyes on Jesus. You turn to Matthew chapter 26, and we have Jesus in the garden. And if you have never done this, I'd encourage you to do this. Read through all the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And you'll see how they stress how much weight was being pressed upon Jesus in this moment. He knew that his time on this earth was down to just a matter of hours. That a supposed friend was going to betray him for what amounted to something less than $3,000. It was the price of the cheapest slave. Another close friend, the supposed leader of his band of disciples, was going to lie, deny, and curse him. Run away. In fact, everyone was going to run away. His family, his friends, his disciples, only 3 would remain at the cross. Oh, and those people, the ones he preached to, the ones he taught, the ones he blessed, the ones that he healed, the ones that had just shouted his praise, the ones that he held their children and blessed them, they were going to hate him like no one on the earth has ever been hated before. And he knew that the sin and the shame and the guilt that he was about to carry from an entire history and an entire future wasn't the only weight, but he was also carrying the weight that brought with it the separation. Think about that. For the first time in his eternal being, Jesus was void of the presence of the Father. I want to read something to you. You can turn there. Philippians chapter 2, verses 7 and 8. And it says, "But he made himself of no reputation, taking the form of a bondservant and coming in the likeness of men. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even the death of the cross." I'm going to read it in one more translation, a different translation, the Passion Translation, because I hope maybe for some of you that this translation might ring your bell, that you might start to see what this is trying to tell us. It says, "Instead, he emptied himself of his outward glory. By reducing himself to the form of a lowly servant, he became human. And he humbled himself and became vulnerable, choosing to be revealed as a man, and was obedient. He was a perfect example, even in his death, a criminal's death by crucifixion." And so in the middle of all this pressure, in the middle of this aloneness and this despair, what did our perfect example do? He cries out, "My Father, if there is any way, let this cup pass my hands. Nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done." And in that moment, Jesus emptied his heart, his entire being to the Father. But there's something we need to be aware of. When Jesus said, "Not my will, but your will be done," circumstances didn't change immediately. He didn't just get up from that tree, get up praying, and walk immediately into Sunday. No. First, he walked into Friday, into the betrayal, into the trial, into the humiliation, into the suffering, the beating, the hatred, the crucifixion. And then he walked into Saturday. We don't preach a lot on Saturday, do we? Saturday is the empty. You have all the disciples on Saturday locked up in a room because everything that they had, they gave to something that was now dead and in the ground. And they're terrified, they're scared, they're alone. It's Saturday. It's empty. But here's the thing about Saturday. Sunday was already determined. God had already spoke it into existence. He had already destined the miracle that was going to happen before Saturday even was thought of by man. The disciples just didn't know it yet, and neither do you with whatever Saturday you're walking in. And see, it was in that moment of Jesus' surrender, it was in that moment of emptying himself out that the greatest rescue that humanity has ever seen occurred. See, Jesus emptied himself to fill our emptiness. And from that stark, rugged, cursed tree came a stream of scarlet crimson love. And it flowed down with a wave of unmerited grace. And then from a dark and empty, cold tomb burst a life, and a life more abundant. You see, Jesus can take what is empty and make it full. He can take your lack and make it abundance. He can take your suffering and make it a success. He can take your loneliness and turn it into the love of a testimony. And so while the rest of the world is so concerned about being empty, what does Jesus say? That's the way you win. That's how you do it. You come empty. It's what we talked about in communion earlier. You want to feast at this table? You want to be filled with the gospel, which is, by the way, that's not just the synoptic gospels. It's not just the message of salvation. The gospel is everything from Genesis to Revelation. It's in every jot and every tittle. It's in every note. You want to be filled with everything that he has to offer? You have to come empty. You want to see the miracles that you're so desperate for? What did Mary say? Can you trust him enough to do whatever he asks, even when it doesn't make sense? Because it doesn't make sense to come empty. But at this table, you've got to be willing to empty yourself of your preconceived notions, your own ideals, your agendas, your doctrine, your philosophy, your politics, and instead brace Jesus Christ.